All right, cool. So let's drop down a top network, and that's gonna have our cool smoke sim inside of it. So even before we start with that, I would say we know, just like a lot of the other sims here, nothing really happens till frame 10. So right off the bat, I would say this can have a start frame of 10. Cool. So in our dop node, we're gonna need the usual suspects, which is gonna be the smoke object, the pyro solver, and our source volume, and then some other nodes too to come. That's enough for now. And we're not going to get into the details of how the smoke sim works because that would just take too long. There is a whole line of Applied Houdini smoke tutorials that will tell you everything you've ever wanted to know about smoke sims. This is going to be a pretty simple sim, so I'm not going to really get into it. That is to say, it's not a complicated sim anyway, so don't worry about it, actually. So, first things first, we need to make this domain here for our smoke sim, the container that contains the smoke, be big enough that it makes sense. So one thing I like to do off the bat, if I have a smoke sim that rests on the ground, closed boundaries should be on, and -y essentially means the bottom is closed, meaning it's like a ground plane. Also, in order to ensure that that -y rests on the ground, the center of the cube should always be half of how high it is. Because of course, if the center is 0.5, then you can see the ground is here, where the red doohickey is. So what I'll do is I'll just say no matter how high we make it, paste this relative thing here, this just make the center be half. Cool. So that won't save us much time, but that's still something I like to do. Alrighty, so what else can we do? Let's bring this over here. Let's bring this, just past the screen right side. We want this to be, just above where the camera is here. And then maybe this comes over like that. So something like that. I don't know if we want to tweak this anymore. Maybe this should be like, should go that way more. Something like this, though. Cool. As usual, we don't want this domain to be any bigger than it has to be. And this is a pretty big domain with respect to the camera. But at the same time, this is going to be a pretty coarse sim anyway. So it's going to be a very light, very coarse sim. So we can kind of afford to make this like all-encompassing in terms of the screen here. Great. So that's fine for now. What else do we want? We'll make the, we'll do it this way where we say, I want 300 voxels along the longest axis. What do you think about that? I think it's okay. So something like this, something like that. What else do we need to do here? We want to resize this whenever possible. The gas resize fluid dynamic will look in the sim and say, where is there density, where isn't there? If there's not density here, try to reduce the bounding box as much as you can. So for our things, we'll give it a delay of 1 so that the first frame can start by having nothing. And let's make it really aggressive. It's going to look at the density to see where it can remove stuff, or it can remove, size of the domain. I'm going to say be crazy aggressive with this. 0.5. That means wherever the smoke is less than 0.5, less than half dense, which is pretty dense, whenever that happens, try to trim the bounds of the box. Now, they'll still have some padding on the side because of the padding, but that will be the baseline anyway. Again, that will all make probably more sense if you were following from my other volume lessons. So we need to load up the this density node here. That's where we just, we're down back over here with all this stuff. So we want to read that in. We want to add the velocity this time, but we want to use this mask thing where we say multiply the incoming velocity by the incoming density, just to make sure that we're not getting crazy velocities outside of where the this smoke actually is. And similarly, let's use density here as well, where we're going to source density also as temperature. Because these are explosions, there should be heat. There should be some heat to make it rise up a little bit. So that'll look nicer. So let's see what that gets us. So there we go. Here's our first take on all that. We can see the densities coming in, we can see the velocities coming in, we can see that it's colliding against the ground. So everything appears to be working so far, but there's still a lot that we need to do. For one, this is going to need gravity because it's dust. It's dust, which means it's heavy. It will fall back to Earth, but maybe not too fast. We'll want this drag in here. Anytime you have an explosive force, you'll want to have it be quick at the beginning and then slow down quickly because of air resistance. I start with 0.01 for like all of my pyrosims. I find that the drag is very powerful otherwise. So let's see what that looks like. So it starts explosive and it slows down over here, and then it should also be falling back down to Earth, as you can see, and it's kind of rolling along the ground a little bit. It might be rolling the ground too much. We might want to reduce that gravity, but that's a starting point anyway. So what else can we do here? I usually would not advocate using the shape stuff on here if we wanted to actually have more control over our sim. But again, to reiterate, it's going to be a pretty simple sim. So turn off the control field for the dissipation. Let's just have it dissipate everywhere. Let's have it have some disturbance along the edges. Let's just use the default values really. Let's just have it do some confinement so that it gets a little bit more swirly in how it moves. Let's see what that looks like. We may not even need to up the resolution for this because this again is going to be pretty low res. Pretty subtle sim. Okay, so it's falling pretty fast. I can already see. I don't want it to fall quite that fast. So I'm going to say, let's go to the gravity and let's just hack it down. And actually, so set it to -2 here. And then out here, let's actually import to make sure this side is working too. Use a DOP import fields and say on my DOP import fields, well, I'm going to import from this DOP network. I'm going to get the smoke object, whatever it's called. It's something that has the word smoke in it. And let's just get density. Normally I would say get the velocity also to do velocity motion blur, but I really don't think you're going to notice it. And I'd rather not waste the render time on it. Okay, so I'm going to do a little flipbook thing here. And actually I want to see the bounds of the sim. So we put smoke wire shaded on to see the bounding box. So I'm going to do a flipbook here and we'll reconvene when it's done.